aspirant, welcome to this particular lecture series of Lakshmikkant'S Politysummary. Okay, I hope you guys are doing well. In previous class, we talked about regulating act, we talked about amending act, we talked about PITS India Act, and in last we talked about Act of 1786. So now we will be talking about Charter Act of 1793. We will be dealing with Charter Act of 1813, Charter Act of 1833, and lastly Charter Act of 1853. So in Charter Act of 1793, basically what it did, it extended the overriding power given to Lord Cornwallis over his council. Basically, what we have seen in Act of 1786, that Lord Cornwallis was appointed as Governor General of Bengal, and he demanded that he should be given the overriding power, and he should be appointed as the Commander of Chief. So in Charter Act of 1793, basically what he demanded, that was accepted. So formally, in order of basically that position that Lord Cornwallis demanded was extended for other future governors as well. So in 1793, the Charter Act, basically overriding power given to Lord Cornwallis over his council to all future Governor General and governors of presidencies. It gave the Governor General more power and control over subordinate presidencies of Bombay and Madras. So what it did? Basically, centralization is more being powerful. Basically, Governor General being more powerful and subordinate presidencies of Bombay and Madras are now under more control of the Governor General of Bengal. Basically, it is clearly mentioned over here that Governor General was being now more powerful. So let's go ahead. It extended the trade monopoly of company in India for another 20 years. Basically, in India, there was East India Company's monopoly. So by this Charter Act of 1793, this monopoly was extended for another period of 20 years. It provided that the Commander-in-Chief was not to be a member of Governor General Council unless he was so appointed. In Act of 1786, basically Lord Cornwallis, he demanded that he should be the Commander-in-Chief. So that is the extension for future governors as well. And it laid down the members of the Board of Control and their staff were henceforth to be paid out of the Indian revenue. And this particular act of 1793, it provided that the staff, the Board of Control, and their staff. They should be paid using Indian revenue. Okay, means revenue that is generated in India, that revenue will be used to pay board of controls member and their staff. Okay, means the revenue or the money that is coming from England, that is not going to be used for paying board of control and their staff. These are the major changes. These are the major provisions that are mentioned in Charter Act of 1793. So now if we talk about Charter Act of 1813, what it did, it ended the monopoly of East India Company in India, except company's monopoly in trade with China and trade in tea with India. What it did? Charter Act of 1813. So if you see from 1793 to 1833, it is a duration of 20 years. In signed 1793, Charter Act of 1793 basically it extended the trade monopoly of East India Company for another 20 years. But now onward, from Charter Act of 1833, it is being ended. This Charter Act of 1833 ended the monopoly of East India Company. Means now another organization also come to India and they can trade. But companies monopoly in trade with China and trade in India. Companies monopoly. There was monopoly in two areas after this act as well, that is trade with China. Trade with China and trade in tea with India. Okay. So after the Charter Act of 1833, monopoly ended, but monopoly existed for two areas. Okay, for trading with the China and to trade in tea with India. Okay, with India for all commodity except tea was thrown open to all British subjects. The trade with India for all commodity except tea was thrown open to British subjects. Means now competition will be high over there. Other organization, other merchant can also come to India and they can do the trade, but except tea. Now onward, this is going to happen. And another provision was that it asserted the sovereignty of British Crown over the company's territory in India. Now, sovereignty of British Crown over the company's territories in India. It asserted there were some territories that were under control of East India Company. East India Company, some territories were under its control. Okay. So now it asserted Charter Act of 1833 asserted the sovereignty of British Crown. Now sovereignty of British Crown are imposed over the company's territories in India. Okay. this is a very good question. Also, it came in UPSC pre 2019, so mark it as important. Okay? And it allowed the Christian missionaries to come India and purpose of enlightening the people. Basically, now onward, after Charter Act of 1838, Christian missionaries were allowed to come India, and they can now propagate their religion as well. So, and this Charter Act of 1833 provided for the spread of Western education system to be spread over the British territories that were acquired in India. Okay. So it provided the spread of Western education among the inhabitants of British territories in India. 1 lakh rupee for education in native India. Okay. This question also came. Okay. In UPSC pre 2018. So this is also a good point. Basically, by observing such kind of observations, you will be having that much experience that you can judge which question are important, which topics are important, what you have to do it, and on what topics you have to be focused more. Okay. And also, Charter Act of 1833 authorized the local government in India to impose taxes on person. Local level government. And this particular act authorized the local government. It gave permission to local government that they can impose the taxes according to them. Okay. So they were imposing taxes according to them only. So in short, if we say what were the major changes of Charter Act of 1833, first, East India Company's monopoly ended. And another provision was that imposition of British sovereignty over Indian territories. And next one, allowed Christian missionaries to come India and they can spread the Christian religion over there. And it also allowed to impose or introduce Western education system in India. Okay. And in last we talked about that this particular act, Charter Act of 1833, authorized the local government in India to impose taxes on persons. So let's talk about another act, that is Charter Act of 1833. This particular act made the centralization of power at its peak level. It was final step toward centralization. Means now power is that much centralized. Now after that decentralization will start. Okay. Now Governor General of Bengal became the Governor General of India in 1833. In Regulating Act of 1773, we talked about that Governor General now onward will be known as Governor General of Bengal. Now from this, Governor General of Bengal became the Governor General of India, and Lord William Bentinck was the first Governor General in India. Okay. The Governor General was vested with all the civilian military power, and he was the supreme commander of all civilian military power. So it was the final step toward centralization. Please remember this one. It deprived the governors of Bombay and Madras of their legislative power. Basically, the legislative power that were confined in governors of Bombay and Madras, it was now deprived. Okay. So now they have no power regarding to legislations. Okay. The laws made under the provisions previous acts were known as regulation, while the laws made under this act were known as acts. It ended the activities of East India Company as a commercial body, making it a purely administrative body. Okay, what it is trying to say that in previous acts, all the acts, if we talk about Charter Act of 1813, means acts, all the acts before Charter Act of 1833. That changes that were introduced by those acts, those will be known as regulation. That changes, that provisions that were made using previous acts, that are known as regulation. On the other hand, that laws made under this Charter Act of 1833 was known as acts. Okay. And it also ended the activities of East India Company as a commercial body. Now East India Company is a purely administrative body. Basically, Charter Act of 1833, it converted East India Company as a purely administrative body and not a commercial body. Okay. And the laws that were made before this act were known as regulation. On the other hand, the proposals that were proposed in Charter Act of 1833 was known as act. It introduced law member Macaulay in Governor General of Council. Means it introduced a law member in Governor General Councils. Okay. It gave a space in Governor General Councils. We are talking about a law member. A law sheet was allocated for that. That a law member be also part of Governor General's Council. Okay. So let's talk about our and this particular act restricted on immigration of Europeans and acquired property were lacked. And Indian laws codified and consolidated. No Indian denied employment under company on the basis of religion, color. No Indian denied employment. And it also abolished slavery. Which act we are talking about? Charter Act of 1833. Charter Act of 1833. This one. We are talking about Charter Act of 1833. It made these changes as well. It gave a provision for open competition negated by this act. Okay, competition. The concept of open competition was introduced. It restricted the immigration of Europeans and acquired property. And Indians law codified and consolidated. No Indian denied unemployment. No Indian denied employment under company on the basis of religion, color, and it also abolished slavery. No more slavery will be there. Okay. Now we will be talking about the last act of today's lecture. Charter Act of 1853. What it did? It separated the legislative and the executive function of Governor General Council. What I told you earlier, that after Charter Act of 1833, decentralization will take place. This is what I say is happening over there. Okay. So Charter Act of 1833 was the peak level of centralization, where Governor General of India came into picture, and it also deprived the Governor of Bombay and Madras of their legislative power, and East India Company became now a purely administrative body. It also introduced a law member. Okay. But in Charter Act of 1853, from here onward, decentralization will take place. It separated the legislative and executive function of the Governor General Council. Separation of power started from here onward. So it provided for addition of 6 new members called Legislative Councillor to the council, known as Indian Legislative Council, Indian Central Legislative Council. This Charter Act of 1853 for the first time provided for addition of 6 new members called legislative councillors. Addition of 6 new members called legislative councillor to the council, known as Indian or Central Legislative Council. It also introduced for the first time local representation in the Indian Legislative Council. Basically, Indian Legislative Council were framed in this Charter Act of 1853. Decentralization is going to take place. Okay. It introduced for the first time local representation. Okay. In short, we can say Charter Act of 1853. What is it is doing? Is separating the power. And separated legislative and executive functions of governor. Okay. It provided 6 new members council, 6 new member council called councillors, legislative councillors, 6 new members that were called as legislative councillors to the council, known as Indian or Central Legislative Council. It introduced for the first time local representation over there. Okay. It introduced an open competition for civil service. Here civil services were introduced. Okay. In Charter established in 53. Okay. The convenient the civil services was open to Indian as well. So, okay. Basically, this act is making some significant role in for the upcoming generation. So, it is introducing an open competition for civil services, and civil service was thus open to all Indians. The Governor General could veto. Governor General had now veto power as well. Okay, guys. Okay, student. So, thank you and have some great day. Be attentive, be happy, and stay tuned. Okay, and be future officer. Wishing you all the best. Bye.